And going to clap.
All right, we are rolling. We are live.
Live.
And with us this week, we have Bruce Brodeen, who is one of the probably most noteworthy personalities, historian, music lover, encyclopedic knowledge of all things power pop on our show today. And we're very excited about this. So give it up for Bruce Brodeen.
Let your wife clap after that little encapsulation of wonderfulness from you.
Hey,
thank you, Tom.
We're
Thank
honored
you,
to
Lisa.
have you. And
Yes.
we're what's going to happen, this way it's going to roll. We're going to ask you a series of questions today.
Mhm.
Each one will be harder. No, actually, we're going to ask you some
I'm ready to
questions.
lean into the
We're going to
challenge. I
knock
can
them out.
essay that task.
So no, yeah, we just will keep it fairly loose here. We just want to really have an opportunity to spend some quality time with you, to ask some questions, get to know you a little bit better, talk about some of the amazing music that you've put out over the years. How'd you get into it? Some of the lesser known bands and some of the ones that got away. I heard some mention that you have some stories around that. So yeah, it's going to be an action-packed interview. So, you know,
Rock 'em, sock 'em, let's
Rock'em Sock'em
go.
robot style, exactly. That's where we're
For
going.
those of you listening on the airwaves, that was a dropped reference to a wonderful toy made by Jayco in the mid 70s.
Oh yeah,
Called Rock 'em, sock 'em robots, man. That was some serious technology for you children of the 70s.
They need to bring those back.
Not your block off.
That's right.
Yep.
All right. So hey, do you want to start off with our first question?
Yeah. So,
Here it comes.
so there was I mean, when we think of power pop, a lot of us think of the Who, but I think the wave that I'm trying to really focus on is from the 70s, maybe late 60s, 70s. And then there was like a brief period of silence called the 80s.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it that.
Was there
No, what's
some?
going on? There was plenty of power pop going on.
Plenty,
Okay,
yeah.
so there was probably a little bit, okay, but then LA was like totally dead music-wise, and I think there was a lot of us that really, we needed power pop, but we didn't have anywhere to play and all that. So
The 90s explosion is what you're
yeah,
giving
and
up.
so
Yeah.
I think that I discovered you in the 90s,
Yep, me too.
somewhere,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Somewhere in the 90s. So the question would be, when did it start for you? And then, well, gosh, if it was in the 80s, how should I phrase this question?
Why don't we go back to where he started with power pop, right?
That's a great idea.
You know,
You're the
where
guest.
Where does power pop start for you? And we will
I'm
ask
lost.
you. Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. And then we'd like to ask you, what is power pop? Because you know, that's always,
That gets people in trouble.
it gets people in trouble. So we're gonna
Does
put you, I
get-
told you, we're gonna put you on the spot. So Bruce Brodeen.
I wish I should find the I gave it a great sort of description that I wrote down for an article that S.W. Loudon is how does he pronounce his last name that way?
I think so.
Wrote recently from the brothers Steve,
Uh-huh.
and
band.
author and entrepreneur, that I wish I had. But power pop, the big bang moment for me, I mean, is not going to be terribly original, but because it's shared by many, but it will introduce some controversy at the same time too, possibly because the two happened on the same day. I heard Baby Blue by Badfinger on the radio, and Bang a Gong from T-Rex within the same hour in 1972.
Wow.
And in Boston, I grew up in Boston, and it just there was just something that just utterly changed me. I was already listening to the Beatles then. My first record that I ever got was Let It Be.
Wow.
Which is still my favorite Beatles record because it was my first. And so all this stuff going on with the Let It Be anthology is a big
deal.
celebration of my favorite record. But there was something about Baby Blue that was just so kind of sad and mournful, but so hooky. and highly melodic, which is something that I was already attuned to. And I just wanted more of it. And fortuitously, there were some bands that were like Mike Douglas show had the Raspberries on, and the Babies in 1975, and you sort of, and then you had the Midnight Special and John Kirshner's rock concert, and you stayed up on the weekends and you couldn't wait to get TV Guide sometime earlier in the week, and you would flip immediately who's on Kirshner, who's on Midnight Special. In 1973 to 76, this was going on. You got one of your progeny in the background there.
Hey, get lost, kid.
For those not on video right now, we had a young person stick their head out from behind the curtain.
A youngling.
Here, a youngling.
Or gremlin, I'm not sure.
A youngling. But so many things happened, and then of course Powerpop wasn't a thing yet. It really wasn't a term that was bantered about. I was reading Cream magazine, Record Collector, New York Scene, because I very quickly became sort of a proto-punk, because around that same time I heard Iggy Pop, New York Dolls, MC5, all these things sort of converged alongside everything that was going on in AM radio. And that's one of the things in terms of the origins of Powerpop that kind of gets overlooked, is the influence of AM radio, because AM radio in the early mid 70s really at its root was about the song, about melodies, about hooks, about vocals, about high level, sophisticated, engaging arrangements in the studio that had to be projected out over the radio waves and have people not change the radio dial. So that was highly influential for me. But so these all, the world was just a wonderful mix of so many varied styles of music, of which this thing that hadn't been named yet, Powerpop, was in the mix of, and charting in some cases in terms of the Raspberries, but not having a lot of sales success as well. But when the whole Powerpop thing hit, it hit hard, and I was all over it. I was buying singles from England in 75 even, because I had my first business, you guys. I had a mail order company that to sort of future cast what I was going to do decades later. But I had a coin and stamp business, and when I was 12 years old, 13 years old. And so I had a mail order business, and that fed my record habit. The whole purpose of that business was to have money to buy records, of which I became very good at, a very good buyer of vinyl in the 70s for sure. But there was just so much going on at that time. It was really people like the older. I'm 59. And the true baby boomers, the hippies of the 60s, who had a very different experience than I like to say. It doesn't get any better than 1966, 67, 68, 69, fill in the blanks.
Sure.
And I mean, those are great years in terms of the history of music. 1966, I mean, you can going off on a tangent here, 1966, late 65 to early 68, you can break down almost by the month, but by the quarter, the exponential qualitative changes going on in recording technology. You can literally listen to a record that was recorded in the milieu of rock and roll, all the different types of music that was going on in rock and roll then, and you can date it. You can say that was recorded in March of 66. That was recorded in probably, mid-late 67, just based upon what you hear with your ear. So it was an amazing time. And and how fast the Beatles progressed from 1964 to 66, let alone from 66, 60, I mean, unbelievable. The Stones and and on and on. It was a fascinating time. That said, for kids of the 70s like myself, it was a really special time too. There was just so much going on. And if you were a seeker and on the journey to discover more, it was a smorgasbord feast of awesome. And there was just so much music that you could just gorge on, and just fascinating time. So I fell into just falling in love with rock and roll, and I decided in junior high that that's what I wanted to do, was to work in the business of music. I had a band in high school, and was pretty good too. We had probably 60, 70. I was a drummer, not a very good drummer, but I was a field drummer.
There you go.
So I smashed around and hit hard and very passionate behind the kit. And but I knew I didn't have any special unique talents. So I went off to college and majored in theology and political science. And upon graduation in 1985, moved out to LA and lived in Boulder for a while, Boulder, Colorado. And then my wife and I moved out to Los Angeles in 1987.
Nice.
And was going to get a job in the music industry and go forth and find bands to sign. I wanted to be an A&R guy like everybody back then.
Well, of course,
87.
So
now we got to get into this.
Yeah, we got to get into this because that was when glam metal.
Oh yeah, I have stories.
Feverish peak at that point. So
it sure was.
What a scene, right? And I'm assuming you got to get out onto the strip on a regular basis and rub elbows with a bunch of bands.
And I do. I want to find some of that old 80s stuff too. There's some hard to find.
Yeah, there was a lot of it. There was a lot of bands that were big buzz bands that weren't very good.
Mm-hmm.
And ones that got record deals. This is a long list of them that were incredibly woefully mediocre and sub-mediocre, but they had the look. But anyway, I was managing a band from Boulder.
And the girls.
Yeah.
Sorry. Keep going.
But anyway, I managed a band from Boulder, and so we all moved out together, lived with the band in a apartment in Studio City at Vineland and Highland, which have been torn down since then. But it was a great location, would shoot right over into Hollywood, and but it was a band that was sort of like Echo and the Bunnymen, so totally out of step with what was going on at the time.
Gotcha.
And
at least for LA, for sure.
Yeah. But it was only about metal.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't going to happen for the band. And I just trolled around trying to find a job in the business. Worked at IRS Records for a bit. Managed Sam Goody stores.
Nice.
And then I took a detour and managed this is going to go quickly on this one, but a hair care company for 4 years. Nice. Where I sort of cut my business skills from 1990 to 93. But then we're going to get to the not lame thing here now. My wife and I decided to sell everything and move back to Colorado, where we lived in the mid 80s. And we moved to Aspen with no jobs, no clue, early midlife crises. And we lived right by the mountain. Our neighbor was Hunter Thompson.
Nice. That's awesome.
Literally lived right across the street from us. I have Hunter stories.
I was going to ask, but yeah.
Yeah, that's off the subject, but yeah, he was quite a character.
I bet.
But going up on the first ski day in November 1994, was a beautiful powder day, first day of the season. I just decided, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna start a label. I'd been out of the business for a little bit. By the time I got to the top of the lift, the name came to me. It was Not Lame Recordings.
Wow.
It was the first name that I thought, the only name that I thought. I got off the ski lift, wrote it down on a piece of a napkin, which I still have, and put out some initial ideas. and it was going to be only about power pop because there were no power pop labels at that time. Big Deal Records was just starting to come out around that time, but there just wasn't any activity. And I knew there was a need there because I had been communicating with a couple handfuls of other power pop fans on America Online in the early 90s.
AOL.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I was on AOL in 1990.
Wow.
I remember when Stephen Case sent out an email saying, we hit 50,000 people.
Wow.
But there was lots of people like David Bash, Jordan Oakes, and John Borak that were also online. And we were all sort of communicating with each other by the early versions of email in the early 90s, 91, 92. And we were trading tapes with each other and, helping each other discover other bands that we knew about that the others didn't know about.
Incredible.
So much fun. I just knew there was something there, at least for us, for people like, that community, which wasn't a community because you couldn't do community yet then. And I put out a casting call the old-fashioned way. I wrote letters to bands saying, hey, I'm starting a label, send your demos. And off I went. I took a credit card and made a label.
So what year was that?
1994.
Okay, 94.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it kind of went from a hobby. I didn't have any great business designs, no business plan. I wasn't planning on it being a job. It was just going to be a passion project. And within 9 months, I was making enough to almost not to do it full time. And then within, 15 months, it just blew me away. I'm still speechless years later. All of a sudden it was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
I can do this. And I was hearing so many releases from bands that self-released CDs that I very quickly decided to create an online store and mail order company. And I put up the first website for Not Lame in December 1995. I think it was back, true prehistoric days. And it was really hard and expensive, and just threw everything into it. And I was just determined that I was hearing these amazing independent releases, and they had no distribution. Nobody cared about them. Nobody wanted to review them. And they fell under the umbrella of quote unquote power pop, loosely applied. And it was a really simple model. It's like, hey, send me 5 copies of your CDs on consignment, send me 10 copies. And when I sell them, I'll send you money. And then I was releasing records on the label at the same time and trying to set up formal distribution. And there was just a convergence and of wonderful blessing that the internet was starting to take off. I got it in terms of like, holy cow, I can reach the world in this highly specialized broadcast medium and just go out and try to find people that are like me, that are into this music. And it was really that simple. So I just wrote passionately about these bands in printed mail order catalogs that I sent out with online descriptions, and off it went. And over the years, Not Lame Recordings had close to 10,000 releases in its database.
Wow.
That we carried. Most, I'd say 90% of those were independent and small label releases. So countless thousands of releases. Not all power pop, keep in mind. They were variants of related subgenres on the family tree, the lower branches of the rock and roll tree, but they were all sort of connected.
Yeah, we had that. Like, I remember that in 1994, 95, we had like Spanish Kitchen would be on those power pop nights, but they were so eclectic, but yet they were part of the family. It was just that kind of thing.
Well, in LA, where I guess this audience is going to be listening, I mean, those were some it was clear something was going on around 1993. There was a lot of bands out of Silver Lake. It seemed like there was a big, I think Spanish Kitchen was out of there, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I think so. Baby
And
Lemonade.
there was what was his Pronto? What was the name of the label that released the box sets of singles from early Sugarplastic?
Oh,
And I want to say it was Pronto.
wow.
And I was buying this stuff mail order then as a fan. Not hadn't started yet, but when I was living in LA still, I remember hearing about Wondermints from inside the Yellow Pills fanzine, and it was like, holy cow, they're from LA. And somehow I heard about the band playing a show at a Irish pub in the Valley.
Yes.
Can't remember the name of it. And I was
Irish
so excited.
Mist, I think.
What's that?
The Irish Mist, I think it was.
Yeah, it was. But the classic story is, I was so excited. I bought one of the cassette tapes from the band, and this is 1993. I guess it had to be, maybe 92. And I drove into the Valley, and there Wondermints tonight, and I could see the print out there, and I walk in. There's no band setting up, and there's a bunch of guys in bowling shirts and a bunch of trophies on the stage. And I was like, whoa, what's up? The Wondermints is supposed to be playing tonight. And the manager said, we had to bump them. We have a bowling tournament award show tonight. I'm like, wow. God,
wow.
Just a classic, treatment of power pop back then, here we have these future legends and immensely talented individuals. And you are part of that. I've seen videos with you playing at those during those years, Lisa, on YouTube.
Yeah.
I eventually did see them at a club, but it was clear there was something very special going on right away. I was in Colorado then, but it seemed like some of the best bands that I was hearing that were sending me cassettes, that were sending me demos, that were sending their self-releases, that there was just another level of ambition, but not in a crass, like I want to be a star way, but just ambition to be good, to write a good song, and to get it out there and to be heard. And it was clear there was a community, and it was a really fascinating from afar, saying, man, there's something going on. And then, as you know, the history of power pop in LA, Tony Perkins, started Poptopia. Tony released 2 records on Not Lame Recordings in 1997 and 98. Maybe 99 on that second one. The second one was 99, I think. But so I had a connection with Tony, and Poptopia happened, and I flew out for those events and met a lot of the musicians. And wow, it's just amazing. So I was promoting those bands as much as I could. I sold hundreds of copies of the Wondermints CD, and just pushed it hard to anyone and everyone, and all I was a huge Sugarplastic fan, and still I can't tell you how many gigs I saw that band where you would see me up in the front playing air guitar, grown adult making a fool out of himself, hearing anytime I hear another Yourself, I'm like, oh man, that band just did it for me. Ben Eschbeck is, well, anybody who knows him knows he's a genius on many different sort of areas and disciplines, but musically, what he did in that band was really something special. If anybody listening to that hasn't heard of Sugarplastic, go to Discogs and start digging in, and YouTube, and check out their catalog. Radio June was their first record. Bang Goes the World is my personal favorite. That was on Geffen Records. They got a record deal.
Yeah, and my sister dated the guy who signed them.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that till after they were, let go, I should say.
Yeah.
Then I met him. It was weird. But yeah, and the Wondermans had a deal around that, right? Same
Yeah,
time?
in Japan.
Okay.
So I was importing, I sold those albums there. So this is the kind of the nature of the scene back then. I don't know how interesting this is for people out there, but it was, there was the internet still was evolving and emerging fast, but nonetheless, getting the word out was kind of still slow, which is why I did the printed catalogs all the time. But I was importing these CDs in a very old, slow fashioned way, and placing orders for 20, 50 copies at a time, waiting for the importer to get them in, trying to fill orders as fast as possible as they were coming in. But what happened was, because Not Lame was such a center point for a lot of fans of this music, they started communicating very efficiently and effectively with each other in their respective areas where they lived. And Powerpop fans were finding each other. And Not Lame wasn't the only reason for that. It was a conduit and spark igniter for that kind of passion. But from that, allowed things like International Pop Overthrow to happen. Poptopia only lasted, I think, there was three Poptopias. And then one year they had both festivals around the same time. And then David Bash started in 1998 and then took it around to different cities, and we all found each other. And it was great. And Not Lame just sort of went from zero with its first releases in the spring of 1995 and its first mail order catalog then. And it went from nothing to, I mean, I hit 1 million in sales in like
Wow.
2000, the year 2000.
Incredible.
And and just selling power pop. And most of it was mail order. The label stuff never really sold an awful lot. We had some successes with some high profile projects and some bands that did well, but generally, it was always a loss leader, just a passion project. But Not Lame somehow found a way to carve out and release 120 or so CDs from 1995 to 2010.
Wow.
So this was mostly American bands and artists, not like international yet?
There were some international artists for sure, but mostly from America, yes. And I would usually the international artists I might license from another label, another independent label. Like there was an Australia band who's still around, Charles Jenkins called Ice Cream Hands. Unbelievably great band.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite releases, personal favorites on the Not Lame recordings label, was the one record I did with them in 1997. And just fantastic. It was just memory lane traffic jam. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but it was just a wonderful band. Everybody should check them out. Discogs is a great place to launch, I think, don't you? I mean, you can go in there and get the archival information. They have videos sometimes, but then you can do your Google searches from there. Most of the Not Lame releases are archived in there. So if anybody has any interest in finding out what Not Lame did. But our biggest projects, as you guys know, was the Jellyfish box set was a really big deal.
Tremendous. Yeah.
And was a real success. It took about 2.5 years to work on that. And boy, it sold like 8,000 copies of that box set, which were huge numbers for box sets back then. And a couple features in Billboard, so it's kind of profiled in there. And I had to mortgage my house to get that out because I had to come up with a couple $100,000 in cash to get the project completed. And it already was a very capital intensive project because we did everything like top notch, you know, just the best. And then the Posies box set was a few years before that, in 1999, was another big archival box set too, 4 CDs as well there.
Wow.
It's awesome. Fantastic. Hey, thanks for sharing the, you know, kind of getting us to the story of how you guys really sort of pulled it all together, your whole journey, your life journey. I love that, you know, you were skiing, you're going up a lift, and there's something about, you know, getting out of your day to day, but like being on top of a mountain, I could imagine you could have an epiphany at a place like that. And it sounds incredible. You just had the name for the label just like that. You wrote it down and then boom.
Yeah.
It was like, just, it happened all at once, right? I mean, yeah, you probably, I'm sure you were thinking about it a little bit, but something so powerful that hit you at that moment, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah. You know, I don't recall thinking about it. There wasn't like any grand design. It was literally like, okay, we're rebooting our lives in Aspen. We left LA after 7 years. And, you know, I got caught in the Rodney King riots and almost, you know, and just like missed that by a few minutes of getting killed. And was like, you know, driving up the 405, looking down into the valley there, heading back to Simi Valley where we were living. And I'm like, you know, watching the city burn and the plumes and just barely escaping. And I'm like, you know, I think I'm done.
Yeah, that was a
Let's go back to Colorado.
that was a smart move.
Yeah, oh, I loved living in LA for the first few years, but yeah, it had come to its conclusion.
Time to move on.
But yeah, no, it was just one of those things that just popped into my mind, and off I just decided to throttle up and do it. So anybody out there that's thinking of doing anything like starting up their own label, if you need a cheerleader to exhort you to greatness and achieve your vision, find me on the internet. I'll encourage you. That's one of the things that I think I'm proudest of the Not Lame legacy is working with a lot of individuals who wanted to start their labels and sort of encourage them and gave them inside kind of information to get it off the ground. And some of these labels are still around today, so it's really great. And you know, the Waking Hours was a band that self-released.
Oh yeah,
there, and the Masticators and Lisa Mychols, all her projects over the years were prominently promoted on the Not Lame website and mail order catalogs.
I mean, hey, in addition to inspiring a lot of artists and getting the music out there, which is tremendous, the fact that you were selfless in the way that you've helped so many other labels to help, you know, realize their dreams of getting the music out there as well. And it has an incredible ripple effect across all of the independent, you know, music labels. It's just an incredible impact that you've had.
Well, it was a for-profit enterprise because I had a young family and had employees. I think we had 4 full-time employees and a part-time at the height. So there was a lot of capital, a lot of risk exposure, ups and downs. By the time Not Lame, you know, had finished up, I was, you know, I had a lot of red ink that came from that passion as well. But the thing, I was the geek selling to other geeks. I was really into this music. We had our own sort of insider language with how I wrote. I wrote like 10,000 mini record reviews over the years. And you know how it is. There's a language fans in music genres speak that's an insider backdoor kind of experience. And I knew that language, and I knew what I wanted to hear as a music fan, because it was so tough, as you recall, in the 70s and 80s. You're buying so many you're trying to buy music, and you didn't have anything to educate and enlighten you as to what it sounded like and if it was going to be a match with your personal music tastes. And you would read these incompetent record reviews in different music magazines, and they would say a band sounds like, well, let's go into the 80s. The band sounds like, the Buzz ones was like Big Star. Big band for me, by the way. Radio City changed my life.
Yeah.
January 10th, 1975, Woolworths. I bought Bowie's the Man Who Sold the World that day too, the drag cover, if anybody knows who that is, that day. But it just was what an epiphany. I mean, it changed my life, Radio City.
Oh yeah.
But you would hear people drop these names. It sounds like Badfinger, Raspberries, whatever, and then you buy these records. And keep in mind, you're dropping. You're a kid and you're dropping $6 on a record that just didn't sound anything like those bands.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted Not Lame to always do was to try to give as authentic of, I'll use the word again, encapsulation and description that was going to be accurate, illuminating, and give people through the words the empowerment to make an intelligent decision to match up their music taste with what I was writing. And over the years, that credibility built because they were as accurate as that process could be without hearing the record.
Mm-hmm.
So when I said a band sounds like somebody, this, and this band, and this way vocally, and how they craft songs and the production values, I was speaking as an insider because I was selling to other people like me. And that's who I wanted to help. In that manner. And then eventually sound bites made it easier too.
Yeah.
So, but sound bites in the late 90s and the early noughties were very labor intensive.
Mm-hmm.
I had, when I cleared the database and had to let it all go, I had a couple 100,000 sound bites. Taking up huge amounts of space.
I bet.
And I would do the sound bites at, this is getting a little crazy here, probably for your listeners. I apologize, everybody, for boring the pants off you, but it was interesting. But I drop the sound bites into appropriate sections of the song. So 30 seconds in, 45 seconds in, where it was most emblematic of the sound of the record and the sound of the band that I was trying to convey in the words.
Yeah.
So I was just a maniac with trying to get that information to be accurate because I wanted happy customers, and it was imperfect, and sometimes certainly there's plenty times that it didn't match that way, but it was about as good as it got.
Yeah, that takes a lot of work,
and to be consistent.
Yeah, it was, man.
Dedicated.
All the employees did sound bites all the time because it was so labor intensive, but it was necessary because it was that was the vehicle, the avenue on which to be able to educate the prospective buyer of that record to be happy with a purchase that met their tastes.
Wow.
Yeah, starting with the descriptions and all that time and effort of drawing the connections to the bands that really are going to resonate with that person and tell the story. That's incredible. You still have to do that even with the sound bites, right? So it's like the sound bites come along and it's like, yeah, it doesn't, you're still going to keep doing those descriptions, right? Because people got to catch that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of double the work, but if you love what you do, and you clearly do, to put that time and effort into that to ensure that record got set up for success and got every chance for somebody.
Boy, you guys, there was so much great now obscure music that came out during this time period. Before coming down with this interview, I pulled off. I wrote some books a few years ago on the history of power pop back in this era in the 90s and the noughties. And I was going through some of these bands that I was really pushing hard, really promoting, that were sometimes very successful retail wise and otherwise sometimes not. But there are countless hundreds and hundreds of bands that in terms of production quality, in terms of the quality of the music, just made insanely awesome music that is just being lost in the ethers of time and in the digital distorted noise soundscape of the internet, because everything's out there, so nothing is available. And even in an age where we have so much access to so much, there's a lost history that's emerged, where these bands, not that 20 years ago, 15, 20, 25 years ago, are lost. And they're just what, and Lisa is holding up a CD.
See all those scratches?
I do.
It's nowhere to be found. I can't get the CD again. Like,
What is it?
it's Big
What was it?
Hello. It's their
What?
2 albums.
Oh, yeah, Apples and Oranges. Yeah.
And I was looking for like YouTube and, you know, my usual places, Spotify, whatever. And it's like, no, this was only as much of that music only on CD, but it's all scratched up and I can't
Today,
find it.
oh man, I remember this song. Today Will Be Yesterday. That was my favorite Big Hello song. Yeah, I mean, Brad Elvis, what a talent too. I mean, this is a guy who's played with the Romantics for a long time, and he had a great melodic punk band called Screams out of Chicago, that released a record in, I think, 1979, self-titled, well worth finding. And it's never been released on CD, but the music's on YouTube. If you're into melodic kind of late 70s punk, I highly recommend Screams.
Awesome.
Really, really great stuff. Brad was involved with so much wonderful music. And Brad and Chloe came to the Not Lame offices one time.
Nice.
And visited there in Fort Collins, Colorado. Downtown Fort Collins, Colorado.
Sweet.
But yeah, it's like, what do you do? What do we do to sort of excavate and unearth and bring to the surface again Big Hello, which you can't find. If you see it listed on Discogs, there's nothing to buy, right?
Right.
And I have a list of hundreds and hundreds of really highly worthy, meritorious CDs and bands and artists whose musical output really should be hanging around and be available, but alas, it's not.
Yeah, and
so what do we do?
Right, we're geeky collectors, let's say, and there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to, like, let's go to the swap meet and see what we can find. Well, maybe if you're lucky.
Well, in a lot of the cases, these are releases that Not Lame carried in many cases, sometimes as little as 100 copies were made. 300 copies, 500 copies. Most of these CDs had 500 copies, and they were given out to family and friends because they couldn't sell them. In many cases, Not Lame was the only distributor for a lot of these bands, with getting them out there. And yeah, there's just all these great bands that are out there. I can read off a list of bands for listeners if they want to grab their pen and pencil. I mean, how geeky are you out there, folks?
We have to do that.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I've been talking too much, so I apologize.
This is great.
I told you we were just going to go. You know, I was just going to ramble, so I warned you. But not your audience. But here's some bands. I'm going to read off a list, folks. Okay, you go forth and do your research based upon what I'm saying. This is, and keep in mind, this is just a small list of things. And maybe this is how we keep it alive. Everybody goes out and brings this stuff, and you digitize it, you share it, and we keep it alive.
Yep, and it goes from there.
Yep.
So here, okay, there's a band that only came out in Sweden and Japan called Super Groupies. One word, Super Groupies. Awesome. Local guy there in Los Angeles, Randall Kirsch. He released one record called Near Life Experience, which is impossible to find. It was impossible to find when it came out. If you're into the Beach Boys, he played with the Beach Boys. And that's well worth finding. Obscure band, Captain Mike and the Totems, Hindu Rodeo, Every Single Saturday, Stella Luna, another local band from LA, the Blondes, remember them?
Yes,
They
I
released
think I have
three
their
fantastic records on Tina Side Records with them, and then the Teen Machine record.
Thank you. I've been trying to remember their name. I even asked David. Thank you.
There you go. Like Minds. Okay,
Yeah.
Shake Appeal, which became True Love, who released 2 records on Not Lame. The Bloody Chiclets from Canada, another one from Canada. The Novaks, the first Novaks record, self-titled, is amazing. Novaks. Brothers in Stereo. This band's well known, but everybody should check them out. The Exploding Hearts.
Oh yeah.
Only one record because
Yep.
3/4 of the band was killed in a tragic
Terrible.
car wreck just as they were taking off. We got to keep that band's legacy alive. The Oregon Box.
Oh yeah.
The Loveless,
Yep.
Tiny Volcano, a great Jellyfish inspired record by a band called The Days. And the album is called The Mystery of the Watch Pot. 4 O'Clock Balloon, the 45s. Before they became Dawes, they released one fantastic power pop record, Simon Dawes. They have a record called Carnivore, which is very power poppy. Before Dawes became more rootsy and Americana-ish.
I'll have to check that out.
So there you go, all kinds of stuff.
Dang,
There was reissues.
That's a tiny, tiny.
Oh yeah, it's just and Tube Top. That was another favorite.
Which one?
Tube Top from Seattle, I think they were from. Yeah, what was his name? Gavin. He was in Guided by Voices for a little bit, I believe. Anyway, I'm rambling.
So
there were so many, and there were reissues during all this time of 70s stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of my favorite bands of all time, this is a UK band called Blue, and they released a record in 1973 that is one of the most brilliant Badfinger inspired records I've ever heard to this day. Self-titled record. There was a really crappy pop 90s band from the UK called Blue. You don't want that. It's but this was a band that released 2 records in the UK around that time. They came to LA to try to get a record deal. Again, they did a record on Rocket Records with Elton John that wasn't very good. But this first record, self-titled record, well worth finding. I'm gonna do some others. Jet, self-titled record. That came from the Sparks, the Embers of Sparks, the band for Sparks, that kimono and propaganda era Sparks. That band became Jet when the Mail Brothers fired them and went into another direction. And they released one record in 1976, self-titled, and that band became Radio Stars.
Wow.
And who are absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I mean, oh man, there's so much. But I want people like this. There's a record that never came out on CD. I think it was in '79, and by a UK band called The Heroes, and the album's called Border Heroes. They only released one record. That's one that people should find. And I grew up in Boston, so there's artists like the Atlantics, the Elevators, Robert Ellis Oral, his album Fixation. I mean, go find these. Yeah. Have a good time. Report back to Tom and Lisa.
Yeah.
How it goes.
Seriously. Yeah. We want to keep these bands and artists, these songs and all this music alive. And I do have a question about around 2000, 2001, maybe, when the scene just kind of, at least for in LA, just kind of started going down. Do you know, I mean, is that just something that happens with all scenes?
Yeah, I think it's just there's a certain inevitability built into the creative rise of so-called scenes at any time in sort of music history. We're talking not just rock and roll, but in jazz, in the blues. There's these Renaissance kind of encounters that people that are at the forefront of these exciting breakthroughs creatively that are going on, where you have these individually creative and super talented and genius musicians, and there's a convergence with time and place and resources and opportunity and happenstance, and they all sort of just happen, and you have a scene. This isn't just a rock and roll thing. It's an all-encompassing music thing. And what happened in LA, if let's say everybody will have a different timeline in terms of the renaissance of the LA years, I would place it there, since I was in LA all the time during these years, so I know, and I was selling the music coming out of there. I would say 1976 to 2000. I mean, in 1996 to 2000, but there was plenty of stuff that was going on beforehand too, of course. But they peter out. And I think a lot of the LA musicians at that time pointed that there was some infighting and disagreements and personality conflicts. And but I don't really think it was that. It's just the time just moved on. People had day jobs. People had started having kids, and and things change.
And then some bands that got signed and maybe let go, kind of just it killed a lot of our spirits.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't recall any LA band that was signed to a major in the late 90s that had a significant breakthrough off the top of my head. Do you?
No, I can't think of anybody.
Even like when they came along, when the Waking Hours came along, and you guys were playing with Rooney, and what were all those bands that got signed? Everybody got signed with Waking Hours.
Yeah, Silver Jet, the Sugarplastic, Czar, and that first Czar record was just such a classic. Oh my gosh, what a great record. And I always match for some reason in my head. I remember Silver Sun. That's another one people should. Those two bands were so similar in terms of their metallic energy and buzzsaw pump and punch, but they had these beautiful layered melodies on top of all the sort of the layered distortion, and it was a thing of beauty. It was like a power pop version of My Bloody Valentine, Loveless, or something like that. It was really, really cool what those bands were doing, but none of them really had any big success. Matthew Sweet with Girlfriend in the early 90s was really the only breakthrough in the genre. And the Posies, those were the bands of profile. Jellyfish had a huge impact and influence that rippled forward, because that was a band that if anybody saw Jellyfish live, they had a religious experience. And that's why When Not Lame released a box set of a band that released 2 CDs that had 4 CDs of unreleased material, was so successful. Was the legacy that they created in 3 years had such an impact and effect to this day. Musicians that were just inspired by the technical prowess and unique talents that each of the members brought to that band. And these are the things that musicians like you aspire to. And then people on the business side, like myself, you just try to capture that magic in a bottle as it crosses your path, and do the best that you can to get the word out with what little money you had, because these things always required lots of capital back in those days. There's lots and lots of risk. Much of that is greatly diminished these days, but there's so much more inflow of music taking up that really isn't of high caliber. So it's hard to really break through and grab people's attention. And so the question is for artists now, what to do. And everybody has a different opinion. And I'd love to hear what your opinion is as artists. But the thing is, I guess my answer, because I get asked this still pretty often, despite being out of the biz, is like what to do. Because I counsel a lot of musicians here in Colorado, is like, you just got to learn to write songs. And it sounds so trite, but you've got to be committed to an exploration, to dig deep into why you do this, and continually commit yourself to getting better without a feedback loop of positive feedback. And do your best to broadcast that out, because those Spotify plays can add up. Those Instagram reels can really connect. But if you just commit to staying in action and bringing it out into the world, good things, if you are have the talents. And that's the qualifier. If you got the talent, you're going to find an audience, and then you can figure it out. And then you keep on communicating with them, and keep in relationship, genuine, authentic, interactive relationship, and find out what they want to hear more of you from, and you build an audience from there.
I love that. So you're still in the business, kind of, because you're helping musicians still. I
Can't
caught
help
that.
it. Yeah, it's still in the DNA, isn't it? I guess. Yeah, no, I enjoy it so much. It's nice being a fan again and not being on the business side of things and worried about how to make payroll and to pay the stack of bills on the desk. Keep in mind, I don't regret anything at all. You make $1 million, you lose $1 million, and it's
for the greater good.
For the greater good. Yeah, tell that to my wife. She was the angel that said that go forth. I seriously, think about it. Baby, a toddler. You got 2 kids too. You got a toddler and a newborn, and you go to your wife and say, I got this big project I've been working on for 2 years, and but now I just found out I have to come up with $193,000, which was the figure, in cash, and I only have half that. So we need to mortgage the house. Are you okay with that? So I can have $100,000 to? And she said, yeah. Wow. She's like, of course. She didn't, and there wasn't any hesitation. So she was the MVP behind the scenes always, even though she wasn't into the music and really not into the music business ever. But she was very supportive of my vision and my work to achieve that and work with that. So it had a happy ending.
That's amazing. See, it's like, and listening to this after the fact, I can't imagine at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, seriously, that's a huge step right there. That's a leap of faith.
Yeah, but thank you for everything you've done.
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
You were my go-to. I'm like, I want to bring back a lot of this music that we can't find. We need to talk to Bruce.
Right.
Yeah.
These artists are out there, and most of them I've found are, I think, if not all of them, are just extremely gracious. Nobody is in this for the money at this stage, right? Because there isn't any in it really, and it's an interesting conundrum, right? With the artifice of art, and how does that commerce and money component work to keep itself alive? How do you feed the beast that needs to have some sort of financial component to it to be able to survive.
Mhm.
I don't know what the answer is, except to have conversations like this, encourage curious music minds and fans to explore and share and connect with others that are into this. I'm thinking of creating kind of an online platform off of Facebook for people just like this. I can tell you about that later. So I'm kind of thinking of getting back into things, but in a different way,
That'd be
revolving around this idea of the lost, forgotten, and unknown, and the marginalized.
Mhm.
And
Awesome.
how do we bring it back out into the light, as I said before, so it has some sort of digital legs on which to survive, because who knows what the future of music history looks like, and how after we're gone off this earth, what does this look like? What is this era of music that we're living inside of now as individuals? How does that get presented to history? And my belief is that little people like us can still sort of control that by the actions that we take to keep it alive.
Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong answers, except to commit to discovering and keeping the curiosity in the music soul alive.
Yes. Beautifully put.
Love
Beautifully
it.
put. Thank you. Love that. Do you have anything else? Are
My
you crying?
well, it's going teary-eyed. What do you want your legacy to be, Bridge?
Seriously, are you tear? Did I tear
Oh,
you up?
teary-eyed. I got a little teary-eyed.
Yes.
Yeah, you know I'm a
No.
spiritual soul, so I'm a Christian and a believer in a higher power, and it is that. I mean, our ability, especially with everything going on right now, and over the last couple of years, and I don't know how you guys can live in LA, in the midst of all this. All my friends there are going bat crazy,
Mhm.
and
Crazy times.
I couldn't do it. I wouldn't be living there in the midst of this, because it's just soul crushing,
Mhm.
because you're not able to see people's hearts,
Mhm.
and we communicate so much with our faces, and life is fraught with risk, but we've got to be able to see each other and clearly hear their words and the soul that they're coming out from. And so I don't know. I don't know. I'm glad I'm in Colorado.
We just saw our daughter, Will, and our son sang with his choir at school last week, and we saw our daughter sing in her choir last night. Every kid with that mask, and it was so that makes me want to cry. I'm just like,
Well, yeah, and it should, and it's but we won't get into politics, and I'm going to be probably out of step with most of the people in LA, but we've got to be committed to being humans again, coming out of this on the other side, and I would like to believe that art, and music is going to be part of the answer. And it's the older people like us now that have to find a way to be able to communicate to these younger generations, millennials in particular, because they're going to be taking over the economy and all the machinations that make economies work with throughout the world, and saying, okay, well, what are you going to do with this? Because we're handing it over to you. And now we've got 2 years of black space. And what's going to come out of that. So hopefully there's music that's edifying and uplifting and optimistic and positive, to project a future that's worth living and leaning into, for the generations that will follow our children. And part of that is not being afraid of life, because we need to live it out. And I hope that that you folks will be able to do that soon. Again, and kids can get up on stage and see each other.
Yeah.
And have lunch next to each other
Mhm.
and laugh
Mhm.
and cry
Mhm.
because of the nostalgia of longing glances and broken hearts, because that's at the core of power pop, is those kinds of themes of unrequited love. How does unrequited love blossom when you can't see each other? Those kids, their hormones need to be freed. I'm joking, folks. This is going to be edited out, I'm sure, so you will not hear this.
Love it. We love it. We love
Fantastic.
it. It was in the moment. It's in the moment, and we get that. We get it. So I love it. I love it. So
think about what you guys are going to do with this, with the music project, and it's going to be really. I'm here to help you, listeners. If you're still listening out here, reach out to Tom and Lisa. If you have an interest in some of what was talked about here, or anything that's marinating inside your head, in terms of keeping. It doesn't have to be power pop. It can be any genre. I'm a lover, pantheist of many music genres, with that. But it's up to us to have these discussions, and just not be passively letting this music disappear, because it's disappearing fast. It really is, but there is a way. We're going to figure it out.
woo!
Love
Yay! Happy day.
You're dancing here.
What's that?
You're dancing.
Yeah. Now, see, we brought the energy back up. So, woohoo! Very cool. Well, thank you so
Well, I
much.
didn't mean to bring it down.
No, we didn't, but we got really.
I just don't like little kids wearing masks and choir.
I know, but they all matched.
Yeah, that's true. We did. It was all color coordinated. It was pretty cool. You
My
know.
mom, I grew up in the church. I come from generations of Lutheran preachers. I was a bishop's kid. That's how, and you want to know how rebellious I was?
Wow.
I wasn't just a preacher's kid. I was a bishop's kid. But my mom was a choir director and an organist.
Wow.
So I am just so biased to choirs. I was listening to a wonderful choir last night, as a matter of fact, St. Olaf College Choir, which is one of the best in America.
Nice.
School out of the Midwest.
Very cool.
And they're doing a show in London in a couple days.
That's
That's how good they are.
Dang, man.
Yeah, but anyway, choral music, I have a big weakness for it.
That's great. Maybe power choir could be, power pop choir could be a subgenre, like
Whoa.
a radical subgenre.
See?
I like it. You ready? Can you compose? Can you write music?
I need a hook. Yeah, just give me something. Give me a C, a bouncy C.
Okay, Lisa's writing it down. Okay, what else do we need to cover to help you in this project here?
I think for this particular one, this is a good start.
I agree.
We may call on you again.
I may have some questions for you when I start cutting everything up.
Yeah, because we're going to put some music throughout it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
But yeah, this may not be the only one.
I mean, hey, the way we roll is typically we have about, I don't know, we have multiple genres we like to cover, and there's episodes.
But the thing
So
is,
it's not just a one and done.
right, but the thing is, because this is just the beginning. If I can find a way to go, okay, this is 1997, I have some questions about certain bands or something, I might call on you for that.
Okay.
Specific things.
Yeah.
Here, I'm gonna stop the recording.